Hi guys, I've got Max Whitehead from Whitehead Group with us. One of the worries about employer, and we've seen it happen all the time, is they employ somebody, they're the best in a field, and the problem is because they're very good at what they're doing, or they're in average, they learn a lot from you, and they go off and start on their own, and after a while they steal all your clients because they build a relationship while they're working for you. And after that, they just get all your clients, and it can damage the business quite a bit through this process. So what are the protection, what are the things that the employer can put in place to make sure that doesn't happen to them?
Yes, and it's a very real issue, Brad, because I see it regularly within my side of the business. And employers do need to protect themselves. There's a couple of things you can do to do that, and I think it'd be very wise you put these things in place before you employ somebody, particularly young people that you're training up. There's a lot of investment goes into that and a lot of costs. So those things, first off, you could put a restraint of trade within your employment agreement. So what that says is that those employees are forbidden to go off and, well, steal your clients for a period of 6 to 12 months. You could actually safely put a period in like that. But you also should be very, very clear in terms of what you're trying to protect. You first off have an onus to prove that you've got something that needs protecting, and that's maybe the unique way you do work or the processes you've taught that person. And then you need to then in that specify what they can't do, and that you can restrict them with that. Those clauses are available. You could come to myself or Brad and get those clauses to put in your agreement, but have them scrutinized carefully because there are some very clumsy ones out there that those employees could sneak through. And so you need to make sure that's out there. Now, another thing you can do, if you're actually paying for those employees then to go off to get specialized training, like an apprentice or somebody's going through that, you can actually get the employee to sign up before they undertake that, or before you invest the money. Say, for example, it's $2,500 or $5,000, that if they leave you within the next 12 months, for example, or 2 years, they've got to repay you that money. Now, I'm getting plenty of calls from employees going, what, do I really have to pay it back? And yes, they do. Yes, they do. But you must have that worded right, put it into your agreements, and it's got substance, and they can come back to you. Now, I'm having some employers of trying to actually say that during my time, I had this person with me, I spent a fair bit of my time with them. Could be a bit more difficult to enforce, but you could still put it in there as a deterrent for that employee to run off with all your knowledge and go in competition to you. But certainly one thing you should do is protect them from not being able to solicit your clients. I hope that's been helpful for everybody, Brad.
Yes, I think it's been very helpful. So the solicitation to the existing client can be that indefinite rather than a 6 months or 12 months?
No,
because there is a restraint of trade, so they can't trade close to you, but can we have put the solicitation to the existing clients that are dealing with for a longer period?
Yeah, the restraint of trade has limitations. The courts are reluctant to impose them because they say it's not in the public good. It's very interesting because, and I'm fascinated with this, so forgive me, but what the courts say is competition in our society is good for us all. It actually makes people more profitable. Anyway, we won't go into that. So what they're saying is they don't want to deter it unreasonably. So what the courts have said is a ongoing restraint forever and ever, or for a too long a period, they will say no to. So what the courts have said is that they will intervene and even rewrite that clause for you, or rewrite it. They will specify a 6-month period or a 12-month period is more reasonable than a 2-year period. So it's something you need to be aware of and perhaps need professional advice on before you do it. But the safety margins would be 6 months, maybe 12 months would be pushing it even. But it depends on your industry, because some of them, some industries they work in that are annualized, for example. So the peak period is only just for a few months. But again, seek advice. It's probably good way to do it.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned was about the training, but the other thing that we've seen in between our clients happening all the time and in the market is the fact that the employer gets sponsor the employee for getting a permanent residency or sorting out immigration. But more often, after the immigration goes through and the person gets comfortable and get what they wanted, they just move on. But for the employer going through that process, it's a big process to go through. It's a big liability, and they have to make sure that everything is in place, and they have to advertise and do all sorts of things to go through that. And it's not fair for the employer basically to lose that employee, because obviously they got the first job, they can go off and apply for the second job a lot easier. So is there anything similar to the training for the immigration sponsorship that they can apply?
Oh, Brad, you touched on such a very critical area that I've probably missed off here. That is a no-no. Some employers in New Zealand, what they've done is said to the workers, I'll give you the job, but you've got to pay me back a certain amount of money, maybe $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And what's happened, the Immigration Department, and under the Wages Protection Act, that's forbidden. You can't have an employee required to pay that money back. So that's something it's very difficult for employers to do. So there's a degree of risk. Now, you can still restrain them from leaving you for a period of time, but that cost is going to be on you as an employer. So be very cautious of that. Some employers have gone down a long way. There were some employers importing employees, skilled workers from the Philippines, and they would do that, getting them to repay the money back. And of course, that was a cost that they had to, they got fined for it. So again, Brad, very good question, because that's a trap that a lot of people could easily fall into. So
Thank you, Matt.
Because the reality is that any expense you've had while they're in your employee, you can charge for. But any previous expense to get them into your employee, I mean, some employers used to charge people for paying their recruitment company. That's a no-no now. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah, definitely. I think the main expense for the businesses is the time that they spend to have to train the new staff and get them on board, and that's a huge expense. And unfortunately, lots of employees, they don't understand that side of the thing. So it's a cost that it doesn't come to the profit and loss report, but it's a cost of time for somebody to train them and support them throughout that time, filling up all the forms and get them trained and get them inducted and health and safety or whatsoever. It's a costly process. So yeah, that's one of the kind of things that you have to take a risk in a business, and that's one of them, I guess.
Very good, Brad. You'll actually, some people will think they'll be able to recover that money very quickly. So I think your question is very, very valid and helpful out there to people.
Cool. Thank you, Max. If you have any other questions about this matter, just contact whiteheadgroup.co.nz. Have a chat with Max, and him and his team would be able to help you there. Thank you, Max.
That's right. Thanks, Brad.